Hello everyone and welcome to today's Dementia Researcher Salon. My name is Adam Smith and I'm delighted to be hosting this session, which today is called the Colab Lab, Making Multidisciplinary Work Work. We all know that dementia is a complex condition. It touches on biology, behaviours, psychology, care, health systems and society. No single perspective can capture it fully. And that's why multidisciplinary collaboration is so important. But as many of you will know, it isn't always straightforward. Different disciplines bring different methods, priorities, and even languages, which can make teamwork both exciting but also very challenging. This is especially true in clinical settings where both of our guests come from that world, where research and care come together, and trials only succeed when people are delivering day-to-day care, are coordinating with those who deliver the studies and work hand in hand together, and managing those collaborations is probably going to form much of the heart of today's discussion. So as I mentioned, today we have two fantastic speakers to explore what it takes to make this work in practice. We have, first of all, the incredible Laura Rooney back again in the salon. Hi, Laura. Laura is the lead research nurse for the Alzheimer Society, the first lead research nurse for Alzheimer Society, where she leads a new £3 million dementia research nursing programme, the first of its kind across England, Wales and Northern Ireland. Laura brings her experience from cancer trials delivery, where her work on embedding research into NHS settings to accelerate dementia study recruitment has been incredibly successful in Scotland. And we also have, stepping in at the last moment, and I'm incredibly grateful to the wonderful Dr. Emma Law, one of our regular bloggers at Dementia Researcher as well. And so I'm sure you will have read some of her blogs. If you haven't, go look for them. They're really great. Emma is the strategic manager for the Neuroprogressive and Dementia Network across Scotland. Emma has over 35 years nursing experience, 13 of those working in clinical trials management. She also, like that wasn't enough, Emma also pursued a PhD that reflects her passion for ensuring that people living with dementia and carers can access and participate in research. So together, Laura and Emma will share their perspectives on managing and working within multidisciplinary teams. And as you will know, the usual salon format is that each of our speakers present for 10 minutes or 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll have a chat, and there's an opportunity for you to post your own questions as well, which you can do in the chat at any time. I will enable chat now. There you go. The Q&A room is now open. If you don't want to put your name to it, you can do that anonymously as well, or you can chat amongst yourselves in the chat space. Or if you'd really like to come on screen and join us on the stage to share your own perspectives, we can invite you to do that too, although nobody ever has. So you're all clearly very shy, but hopefully maybe this week or next week we'll get somebody to do that. That's enough from me. I should shut up, and we're going to let Laura, who is probably down to 30% battery power on her laptop now, who is going to go first, and I'm going to share some slides on behalf of Laura.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah,
there we go, Laura. So, over to you.
Thank you very much. So just if I drop off, I will rejoin on my phone. I'm down to 10% battery, unfortunately. But I suppose when I've been reflecting about clinical research delivery in all its forms over the duration of my career, a bit like raising children, I really do believe that it takes a village. I don't think that any one discipline or any one staff group can effectively run a dementia research study, or in fact any research study. And multidisciplinary working is absolutely the way forward. Oh, can you go to the next slide? Oh, fab. So as many of us know, dementia clinical research spans diagnosis right the way through to end of life. And that can incorporate multiple clinical specialties, which has great opportunity, but also presents additional challenges when services are, their infrastructure is different, their resources are different, their staffing levels are different. And actually, sometimes culturally within specialties, there are ways of working that might not seem familiar to others. Potential participants for dementia research studies can be in the community, in primary care through general practice, or in secondary or tertiary care, or actually social care settings. And there are some fantastic resources like the Enrich networks that look to include people living in residential care homes and research. And we have to think about all of the ways that we can reach out and offer opportunities to everyone who may choose to take part. Where you live, whether that is at home or in a care home, shouldn't dictate whether or not you can access research opportunities. And multidisciplinary working with social care colleagues is increasingly important to raise awareness in that space. And the NIHR have funded a number of research nurse leaders to further develop that work, which is absolutely fantastic. We've just done a piece of work at the Alzheimer Society and with the Dementia Trials Network, looking at the public, so people affected by dementia and those that care for them's perceptions of dementia research and experiences of being approached or taking part. And at home, after a diagnosis, was highlighted by a large majority of the survey respondents as a key time that people would like to hear more about research opportunities. But we know that healthcare professionals and researchers are not generally in people's homes. We know that research opportunities are not always discussed at the point of diagnosis. So we're having to move into new ways of working and think beyond just the traditional healthcare team and think about how can we empower and educate our dementia advisors. So the Alzheimer Society has about 800 dementia advisors across England, Wales and Northern Ireland, providing post-diagnostic care. And Alzheimer's Scotland,
I'm going to jump in there and jump to the conclusion that Laura's internet battery on her laptop. There's a story behind this. Laura unfortunately doesn't have a laptop charger with her and is now going to jump onto using her mobile device to join the session. While we're waiting for Laura to return, I do have some useful stats, facts and figures available to hand for exactly this kind of eventuality. So here we go. Dementia research is highly multidisciplinary. Projects involve neuroscience, psychology, epidemiology, care, research, technology, and data science. And a 2023 survey of UK researchers found that over 60% of them collaborate with at least 3 different disciplines in their work. And that's in basic science or fundamental science as well, where it's not all just one team. And we've got Laura back. So there we go.
Somebody back
Laura,
on
back over to you, if you can remember where you were.
Yeah, so really about thinking outside of the traditional ways of working, and I just heard the tail end of what you said there, and it's absolutely about collaborating with as many different professional groups as possible. So new ways of engaging dementia advisors across the UK in terms of speaking to people about dementia research, and also feeding in some really key ideas on the kind of research that might be needed to improve the diagnosis, treatment, care for people living with dementia. We know complex problems need multiple minds to help form solutions, so multimodal approaches are essential. But by coming together and having lots of different disciplines, it gives us a significant opportunity to learn from other specialties. I've certainly taken a lot of my learnings from cancer research into my role in dementia research, but we learn lots every day from the psychologists, the clinicians, the speech and language therapists, everybody that we interact with in terms of delivery of research and perspective on things. Everyone's got a different perspective, but it doesn't mean that anybody's right or wrong. So I think that it's essential to be discussing opportunities and collaborating. You change the slide, please, Adam. just while that's changing. So I think quite often when we talk to people in the public domain about who they perceive to be delivering dementia research, or in fact any research, they will think about the doctors and nurses that they see. But actually, there's a whole invisible army of people that are absolutely critical to designing, developing and delivering research. The kind of bullseye on the side there is just a very brief representation. So if we think at the core, which is where the patient contact is, there are a limited number of people that will actually physically come into contact with a research participant. However, as we move out through the rings, there are more and more specialties and more diverse ways of thinking and approaches that are needed to be able to safely and effectively deliver research, and we literally couldn't do it without each and every single one of those. Throughout my career, it has been really insightful and actually an amazing professional development opportunity to be able to learn from others, to be able to take on different ways of thinking, different perspectives, and understanding how each of these roles fit like a piece of a jigsaw. I think historically it was very medical dominated. There were set ways of working that just in a modern day society are not so apparent anymore, and multidisciplinary, non-medical allied health professionals, nurses, pharmacists, etc., are all being encouraged to be principal investigators within clinical research in the NHS, which is fantastic, and it really does give that richness of approach. You can change this slide, please, Adam. But I think what's really been critical and what I've learned over the years is it's not just about touching base with people when you need them. In order to build an effective and engaged research team, far beyond the scope of those that we might actually employ or fund, you have to build meaningful relationships across departments, across teams. Get to know your colleagues beyond just their job title. What's their motivation? What do they like to do? Where can you help them in the same way that they will help you? Sometimes a box of chocolates or a packet of biscuits goes a long way. And
I think what we had there was a slight ding of an email possibly coming through at exactly the moment, which has perhaps taken Laura away from the screen. We love having these technical shifts. Oh, Laura's back again. That's okay.
I'm sorry, that was hotel Wi-Fi this time. Yes. So
you're coping very well with the distractions.
yeah. So recognizing, giving everybody space to talk is essential. When you are looking at a new clinical trial protocol or you're designing a study, give everybody their opportunity to speak, come at it from their angle. There's so many ways that we can think about things. Others in different specialties will think about maybe new innovative approaches that we would never have thought of in in nursing. We're talking a very medical model, but when we collaborate with mental health nursing colleagues and others, it gives us a much more rounded way of looking at things. But working with multidisciplinary teams does bring its challenges in that not everybody's going to agree. Not everybody is going to want to do things in the same way. They're not going to approach things in the same way. And it's important to be able to have a forum where we can talk about our challenges and come to a resolution. I think we have to recognise them. There's no point in sweeping anything under the carpet. It's really important that we collaborate, but that we continuously learn and we share things. And in addition to talking about where the challenges are and how we're overcoming them and sharing that learning, not just with our teams, but maybe with other sites that are working on similar studies, we do want to celebrate success. And quite often in a research study, you're going to be on the phone to the imaging department or somebody similar saying, is there any chance you could do a scan for me? I've got a participant, I've got a slot in a study, but I actually need a scan tomorrow. is there any chance you could squeeze it in? If you've got a really good working relationship with the person at the end of that phone, you're far more likely to get the scan that you need. But also, if someone's going above and beyond for your patient, thank them, give them feedback, tell them, as a result of you, accommodating my patient, the patient passed their screening, or, and was able to take part in the study, or what happened to that patient, because the wider support departments shouldn't be transactional. They should very much feel like they are part of a research team. They should feel as if they are contributing to that patient's journey every bit as much. And I suppose that kind of leads on to my last point about keeping people updated. I love to send a Christmas email, and I love to tell people how many patients we've put into studies over that year, what the impact of their involvement has been, thank them for the times that they've went above and beyond, and really try and help bring them on the way. If we get findings from studies that we've worked on, we make sure to share them so that people feel invested, because the supporting departments in particular are often hidden parts of the team, but they're absolutely vital. So my strong advice for anybody that would like to build multidisciplinary working is really about engagement and communication with your team. And I'm going to stop talking now in case I have any more technical difficulties. Right.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Laura. The point you make at the end there about giving thanks is so important. I remember way back when talking to particularly GPs who were often asked to make referrals into trials or into certain services, but one of their biggest complaints was that they felt that this was just a bit of a blind process, that they make these referrals and then were completely ignored. Nobody ever then there was no feedback loop to them, which made them just feel like, well, what's the point if you don't ever get that kind of feedback or that involvement? And I think that's so important, particularly with collaborators. I guess, it's recognizing that team isn't just the people immediately involved, particularly in trial delivery. It's not just those immediately involved, it's those around the edges and the tertiary as well, isn't it? Do you think that there are certain disciplines that tend to, like in your involvement in trial delivery particularly, do you think there are certain disciplines that tend to dominate a little bit more than others? And if so, how do you counterbalance that?
I think that quite often, oh sorry, I'm moved myself. I've got my mobile phone here now. Quite often it's a medically dominated model, and there's a lot of I think that there's a lot of work that has been done and continues to be done about changing the narrative that we work with people and not for them when it comes to that medical model. There is, I would say, a changing landscape in terms of people recognising what other people can bring to the table and at different viewpoints, and particularly where people are coming with maybe a slightly more patient or public centric view. If you're working with scientists, they're phenomenal minds, they are really out there. But sometimes in my career, we've been designing a protocol and the scientists want every exploratory sample going. They would like the patient to have a blood test, every other day. But the burden that places on a participant and their caregiver to come and go is not realistic. So there's a piece of work to be done there about finding the balance in the middle. What is essential? What helps you get to your end points? But where can we cut back in terms of making sure that it's a accessible and feasible study for people to take part in? So I think, there are sometimes hot debates, Adam. There are sometimes some fiery exchanges. I'm not going to lie, but I think continuing the conversation and respecting each other's viewpoints and continuously going back to it does help make for a much better research environment.
I think having that, obviously, I think so much emphasis seems to be put on the PI on these studies that they often, I've certainly worked in places where the PIs hold all the information really tightly to their chest because it's almost like, oh, you don't need to know that. They kind of compartmentalize. And I much prefer that kind of approach where everybody knows everything. Everybody's, I don't know if you found the culture is set, or who can set that kind of culture in a team.
I think that it's definitely when you join a new team, it takes a while to set the culture and it takes a while to change ways of working, and people can be resistant at the start. Most research teams, clinical research teams, will have trial meetings and they'll go through all of the available studies, they'll go through the current participants, potential participants, and it gives an opportunity for discussion, debate, and challenge in that space. And I am very much like you. I think that if we're all working on a research project together, then we all should be party to the same information. So my background is in stem cell transplant and cellular therapies, and we had all of our information on a central secure repository. And what that meant is that if out of hours, or if something was to happen or one of us was to go off sick, we had shared research diaries, we had shared patient notes, we had shared updates, and it just makes for a much better way of working, and it's much smoother for the participants as well, because people know what conversation did you have last time, what were your challenge areas, does someone need a bit of extra support, or was there a problem with their travel expenses, because actually just having the money to attend a study visit sometimes is such a barrier for people. So yeah, I think just continuously chipping away at it. If you feel that communication is difficult within the team, just continuously look to try and introduce new ways, go slowly, and then when people start to get warm to the idea, it is a much better working environment.
I think as a team leader, it can take some time to build that up, can't it? I mean, I'm one of those people, one of those awful people at job interviews who, when you're asked, like, what's your biggest weakness, I say, oh, I'm a workaholic with too much attention to detail, and and everybody just groans. But what that means is that you're also less likely to trust other people to do things, that you tend to do everything yourself. And I know I have to be very conscious to say, right, okay, I need to get better at delegating things to other people and trusting them to get on with it. And I think particularly people in new leadership roles, that can take quite a little bit of time to build that trust, and to recognize that you can't do everything yourself. Even though you're a perfectionist, you just have to adjust your expectation levels and trust the people around you.
No, absolutely. And that's something I think everybody struggles with. I've definitely struggled with that over the years, where I have had if I don't do it, it won't get done mentality, or I'll just do it myself because it's quicker. But actually, the further you get into your leadership journey, you realise that as much as you're responsible for the overall activity, absolutely, and making sure that it's done to high quality and that it meets all the governance standards, you're also accountable to your team. And by doing everything yourself, you're denying them opportunities to develop, to learn, to problem solve. They have to become the clinical research leaders of the future. We have to have sustainability. And therefore, by being supportive and mentoring, and not coming up with the solutions for people, but providing them that space to do it, and understanding that maybe the first time somebody does something, it's not going to be the way that you would do it, and it might not be perfect, but none of us are perfect. And actually taking the time then to share with them where they might think about it differently in the future, or actually, was it just not the way you would do it, but it still worked out perfectly fine and everything was done. And it takes a lot to let go. It's very uncomfortable space, I think. As is, being quite forthright and saying we are going to communicate and we are going to do this. It takes confidence and it takes a while to build that. But I've been really lucky in my career to have some amazing mentors along the way. I try and reach out and mentor as many people as I can, whether that's in a sustained way or whether it's kind of more occasionally. But yeah, you're right. It's just something that we all have to try and be aware of, and also try and think, if we are in a more senior position or a leadership position, is there someone in my team that would be equally as capable as me, or is needing a stretch opportunity that I could support to do this? Is always the approach that I try and take.
And we're going to come to Emma, who's been really patient waiting there. Because I'm gonna bring this back as well. Our very, very first salon webinar that we did back in June, July last year. Now we've done nearly 60 of these. We're coming to the end of this run at the end of September. Talked about sexism in academia, and that was talking about how certain people, particularly how certain collaborative teams as well that were male dominated, that they found that the women working in those teams weren't given as much time to talk in some of their team meetings, or were given that kind of housework to do, like taking the notes and things like that. So I think it's also we're not going to have time, and this isn't about sexism today, but I think it's important to kind of look at team dynamics as well, and gender mix, and making sure that we're being fair to everybody, whether that is the pharmacist or the PI or whoever it is, particularly in your space. But be conscious of that unconscious bias that I think can particularly creep in clinical places, where there's that, like you said, in the medicalized, say, where you assume, oh well, the consultant neurologist must be the most important person in the room, when they might not be, right? I mean, they're usually not. It's the nurses who are the most important people. Everybody knows that.
Well, maybe Emma
I'm
and I.
I'm going to stop there while I'm being deliberately controversial and come to Emma, who also, you were a nurse before as well, weren't you, Emma?
Yes. I am
before,
still.
You ever stop being a nurse? You're.
I am a nurse. I'm a registered mental health nurse. That's my background, and that, strangely, it's almost like you've seen exactly into what I wanted to talk about. So talking about multidisciplinary teams, and I'm going to go back into the dark old days. I was thinking multidisciplinary teams. So my experience in multidisciplinary teams goes back a long, long way. And I'm going to go back to the 80s, where I first started my nurse training. And in the 80s, for a multidisciplinary team, well, the doctor was the multidisciplinary team. The doctor was king. The doctor and I'm talking about in a clinical environment. And I can still remember, as a young student nurse, the doctor would come into the ward and you had to stand up. You weren't allowed to talk. And the doctor would come in to the wards with their entourage, who were all other doctors, but younger doctors, or more junior doctors, I should say. And that's how it was back in the 80s. The doctor was the multidisciplinary team, and nobody else really got to speak. Certainly in where I worked, but things moved on. Thankfully, things changed. So we come into the 90s, and we've got a bit more input from the doctors. And by the 90s, we were sitting around and we were doing these multidisciplinary team meetings where you had the doctor, of course, leading it. But also other people got to have their say. So you had the physios coming in, nurses, OTs, social work, and sometimes people from social care. So that you're beginning to see the multidisciplinary team developing, actually becoming multidisciplinary, not unidisciplinary. So then came the in the 2000s, sort of early 2000s, moved into the care trusts. I'm sure everybody remembers trusts, and things then changed again, I think, for the better. And I can still remember some of the meetings that I was involved in, where you'd have quite a large group of people to discuss particular patient issues. And so the kind of people, you'd have the doctor, you'd have perhaps an Alzheimer's Scotland link worker, perhaps nurses, again, occupational therapists, social workers, social care. But this is where the big change came in, is that you would have, wait for this, the patient and their carer, or the person, you know, who looked after them at home, would be invited into the meeting. So that was a huge change. People who were, the care was aimed at was actually involved in what was going to be said, done, how things were going to progress. And the reason that I talk about perhaps the bad old days to things changing is I think that I moved from clinical into research, and you could almost see that clinical and what happened in clinical multidisciplinary teams was mirrored by research and what happened in research. So in research, originally it was the doctors, usually male doctors, talking about sexism, but not always, but usually male doctors. And things have changed enormously between 2000s, early 2000s and now. So I do remember one of the doctors I worked with who was very much the lead. And I remember saying to him, have you ever considered that the doctor is not necessarily the leader of the team? And this really threw this person. It took him days. Oh, I've just said it was a male. Took him days to come back to me to say, do you know, I've been thinking about what you said, and actually, you're right. It's not always the doctor who is the lead of a team. And that continues, I think, into research, unless it's a CTIMP, a clinical trial of a medication. Then it has to be a doctor who is the principal investigator, because that's dictated by the drug company. But there are more and more PIs, not on the big clinical trials, but certainly on many other trials, who are not the doctor. Often the PI has to be somebody with some kind of professional qualification, but not always, because what's also is happening is that as I said, the people who are involved in the research may be the person with a dementia or their carer, and this sort of co-production is becoming more and more prevalent, I think, nowadays than it was back in, certainly, 20 years ago. That was practically unheard of. So I think research, as I say, I think it's mirrored clinical, what happened in clinical. What else was I wanted to say? Yes, I think that one of the huge changes, which I think Laura touched on this, was the patient public involvement and engagement, and that has grown enormously, particularly for multidisciplinary teams. That now it is expected in any grant. What has your patient public involvement and engagement been? On the grant application, you have to write how you've involved people in your research, what do they say about it, how's it changed. So I think that the patient public involvement and engagement is a huge area that's blossomed, and so it should. The grants applications, who's involved in these grant applications, and I'm going to talk about a successful grant, which I can't name because it's still at the, there's still a few questions around it, but we know that the money's come through. So with this grant application, the people that were involved, I've got so I went through the application to see who actually was involved. So the lead applicant is a nurse. Oof. And they are a joint lead applicant because they're an early career researcher with a medical geriatrician. There is a clinical academic geriatrician. There is another nurse who is also a professor. There is a professor in health informatics. There's a translational expert who is an expert of looking at how research moves into practice. There's a professor in technology. There's also the co-leads for the patient-public involvement on this grant is somebody who is somebody with the disorder, the disease, and somebody who has a lot of expertise in working, managing groups in co-design. And then there's a doctor in ethnography. So this was a successful grant, and the various people who came together to bring this grant to fruition, and it's been funded. But going back to, I think, to what Laura was talking about, the multidisciplinary teams in research, and I think it is so important, the sharing of information, the sharing of knowledge, that people are getting together and building these relationships to make a successful research program, because these are the people that you are relying on. And I think your diagram, the bullseye diagram is so accurate, with having the people who perhaps never actually see the person who's going to be part of the research, but they are crucial to it all coming together. From the administration staff right through to the consultant, who's the perhaps the principal investigator, if it is a consultant, or all the professions round about that, the radiology, the pharmacy, and building these relationships so that if something happens, if you need a favor because you need something quickly, that this helps to gel the team, and also means that if you do need this help very quickly, that you can ask and feedback. Yes, by your helping us, this person's managed to complete this research day, or has gone through to the next stage, or whatever, however it is. But collaboration, so important. And I also like the idea of rewarding people for collaboration. And one of the ways that we used to do that was when we sat down, we'd always take the biscuits, make sure that people were comfortable, have a room where there was tea and coffee, so that people felt comfortable sitting, talking about the research, perhaps at the very beginning. Can we do this particular research? Do we have the expertise sitting around the table? If we don't, who can we ask? So asking the experts, who else needs to be involved here? And then asking the people who this research is going to be about to be on these panels. I think that is absolutely crucial in this multidisciplinary way of working. So I think my my sort of final few words is multidisciplinary for any research is so important, and it is about collaborating and building up these relationships, no matter what discipline or where your background is. Realizing that everybody has something to bring to the table, everybody's part of the team, that even if you never actually clap eyes on the patient, that doesn't matter, because you're part of the team and you're helping to get this research done. So that's really what I would like to say.
I think you, I mean, the point you made there, I think, is something we've talked about a little bit before, which is all too often, I think, particularly in research and maybe in clinical, because people have always been in that setting, that there are some tips and tools that are used a little bit more in kind of project management and business that can help ensure that you kind of set the structures right from the outset. I mean, you mentioned, I don't know if it's you or Laura mentioned about, like, even setting out from the outset a bit of an organizational chart to say, right, this is all the people involved, these are the groups, these are how they feed into each other. This is, having things like proper terms of reference for meetings, setting agendas in advance, having an organizational chart, being clear about what everybody's responsibilities arm. This isn't a job description. It's like this is what it is. And that way, when problems do arise, you can refer back to this and say, right, this is, and also as well, I think it really helps people understand their place and their role within the team. Because I think particularly in complex places like you work in, I mean, let's talk about the people that might be involved in a trial. Laura, you can come back if you're not. So who would typically be involved in your drug trial? So you've got the PI or the lead investigator at a given site. Then what, one or more nurses?
Oh, many nurses.
Many nurses at a given
yes.
site. Maybe psychologists?
Depending, the psychologist would depend on the type of research, but psychology may be involved if you're doing something like genetics and you need genetic counselling. We've seen psychologists and with expertise in genetic counselling who may be involved.
Other people, what, like maybe possibly physio, occupational therapy, speech and language therapy, as
possibly radiographers. They're key. Pharmacy are key. I'm thinking about clinical trials here, like CTIMPs, clinical trials in investigational medicinal products. I'm sort of thinking my way around the table who would all be sitting there. The administrator.
And other people that refer patients to the study in the first place. I mean, if you're extending the team out, you know, the kind of jobbing clinical staff who aren't necessarily involved in trial delivery, but are essential in feeding you the study participants. They need to know what's going on and how many people you need and what the maybe the requirements of the study are if it's that kind of trial.
Yeah, and the sponsor often wants to be involved because they're the people who are paying for the trial.
Well, so, the contracting, so your R&D team as well.
And finance, governance, education and training, quality assurance. You might have an internal audit team. We used to get internally audited quite a lot, especially if it was maybe a study with an advanced therapy or a genetically modified organism. They're quite
of course, we shouldn't forget administrators and
absolutely.
Data scientist people as well that maybe, and if you're working in fundamental science, it's much the same. You've got I know they tend to work in smaller groups, but the collaborations are much further when you want to bring in some omics or you want to get some other skills from other areas of the lab that you need to bring in.
I was about to say the lab staff, of course. They need to be involved. Particularly if you're asking the lab specimens to go through the NHS labs, do they have the capacity? But working with them about that. If it's going off to a special lab, I mean, we've had to send stuff to Berlin on dry ice. That brings in a huge amount of complexity because then you have to think about how do we get it there and do people know how to fill out these the forms? There's so much that goes into it, but the multidisciplinary team is the place to bring all these questions.
Do you ever, so when in your experience of delivering in these trial spaces, we'll focus on that because I know that's both the place where you're at. Do you ever, evaluate success afterwards? Do you do that? In project management, you'd have these kind of gaps where you go, right, this is an exception, something went wrong, or, do you evaluate not just on whether the trial was successful, but did actually the team do you learn lessons from team management?
Certainly in my career to date, absolutely. I think that we, at the outset of the study, when you are at the setup phase and you're evaluating everybody that needs to be involved and you're considering who needs to be on your delegation log, who has to do study-specific training, what functions are needed, who do I need to share study manuals, etc. with. You're doing that mapping piece that you mentioned earlier, Adam. You're really thinking about who are your stakeholders, and at that stage, you have a stakeholder map. Whatever format it's in, you will know exactly who your stakeholders are. I think as you set your recruitment plans and you're thinking about exactly as you mentioned, GPs, etc., how am I reaching out into the community to get the patients that have this condition to be able to be aware of the research and be referred into me. You have to think about all of your referral pathways. How do you engage? What other awareness mechanisms? Are there patient groups? Are there charities? How do you engage with the wider stakeholders who are not research active themselves, but will have participants that might be suitable for you? And I think at the end, we would always do, so we had monthly morbidity and mortality meetings, which were about the whole clinical service and not just research, but really good opportunity to discuss anything in that, you know, might not have went how we'd planned, or if people had toxicities on a study, so that everybody knew what toxicities to look out for, how it was managed, how to unblind a patient if that was really required, making sure that everybody's up to speed. But at the end, did the recruitment strategy work? Did we engage with the right people? Did we recruit on time and on target? And you know, and what lessons have we learned? Because ultimately the whole ambition of clinical trials is to get new treatments into the hospital or community settings, having them available for people on a wider scale if they're proven to be efficacy and safety. So what can we share with our colleagues? We used to work very closely with the staff on the ward and on the clinical services so that they could see what was needed to give these infusions, to give these medications, to monitor these patients, because one day they'll be doing that standard of care, and we want to take our learnings from research and have then institutional readiness for these new investigational treatments to move into standard of care treatments for the future, really. So I think it's really important to have that kind of cycle where almost a plan, do, study, act type cycle where we're constantly evaluating our success and where we might change things going forward.
So what I'll come to thanks, Laura. I'll come to you first, Emma. Because we've only got 10 minutes left. Just a reminder, anybody watching, you can post questions. What tips would you have for an early career researcher that's coming into an existing team, that this team's already working? What advice would you have for that person, Emma? Somebody joining an existing team, which I think is always a little bit uncomfortable. And we'll come to Laura, because of course you've just had, I know you're starting a new team, but you've joined a new organization recently.
For me, I think the most important thing to do is to listen. Listen to the team, get to know them, but listen to what they've got to say. It's so it would be so easy to go in and say things that are just going to kind of upset people, or
nobody likes to be told that they're doing something wrong, right? That you've got a better idea. I mean, maybe eventually, but not straight away.
Not straight away. Just
why do you do it like that?
Yeah. We always did it like this. Why? Yeah. So listen, watch, learn, kind of get the feel of the team. Sometimes the person who is the designated leader, I'm going to call them the PI, they are not actually the lead of that team. Who is the lead of the team? Where does the power sit? Because it's not always with the person that you think it is. Get to know them, and take your biscuits along to the team meetings. Find out a little bit about people.
I've said that so many times. Smile at everybody.
Yeah, smile.
Is there anything I can do to help you with that? Just be helpful. Be helpful. Right. Smile a lot. Immediately build friends. But I agree, because there's that tendency, I think, as well, to come in, and even if you have got a better idea or a new suggestion, it isn't to say you can't bring that in, but just be a little bit careful.
Yes, use your timings of when to introduce new ideas, and also sometimes make the idea seem like it's come from somebody else. If you've got this sort of burning wish to make sure this happens, make it that it's the PI's idea. You don't always have to take the accolades. Just if you want your idea out there, maybe sometimes it's easier to get somebody else to voice that for you. there's all sorts of ways of, it's almost like toadying, isn't it? It's like, how do I...
But I think also as well, if you're leading a team that's got a new person coming in, I think you can actually absolutely set the culture and set the expectation from the outset in saying that we welcome your ideas, or come to me, or actually don't. I wouldn't passively just say my door's always open, because then I don't think people are necessarily feel confident enough to come and actually walk through that door. I think actually taking time to schedule a meeting in there to say and ask the question, what, you're new to this team. What are your first impressions? Where could we improve? Actually be open-minded that you might not be perfect. Although, of course, you probably are. What about you, Laura? You've had this. You've come to a new place. I mean, obviously, we can't put you on the spot because some of your colleagues might watch this.
No, do you know, I think I agree with everything
But you were brought in specifically before because you had a skill set that Alzheimer's Society didn't have, right? I mean, you were brought in because you were the expert setting this up.
Yeah. So I think it's... My first thing is be inquisitive. I think no matter what job you're in, no matter what level you're at, be inquisitive. Listen twice as much as you speak, especially for those first few months. Understand where people are coming from, what their motivations are, why they're in their jobs, what's their aspirations, and where can you make connections? Because I always think you don't have to be best friends with the people that you work with. You don't have to go to the pub with them on a Friday night, but you do have to have a good working relationship. So you have to understand what their motivators are, but also where their sensitive spots are that you might, exactly as Emma said, you might want to suss out how you approach an idea or how you present an idea, because you know that there will be certain styles that just are not going to work, and you have to, develop that. But you can't develop that without listening, inquisitive, and learning. I think, if I'm really honest, there has been, I've spent a lot of time listening in the last year, because the difference between cancer research and dementia research is really quite stark. And the resource, well, there are some absolutely fantastic pockets of resource, unlike in cancer research where it's much more widespread across the community, across the country and across the whole of the UK. Dementia research infrastructure just currently isn't like that, which is why we are collaborating with the Dementia Trials Network to set up this research nurse network, and to complement existing work such as the network that Emma has set up in Scotland, and providing that kind of broader piece across England, Wales and Northern Ireland as well. But, you're right, things don't always work in one specialty and then transfer immediately to the other. There's often lots of really good reasons why things are done the way that they're done. So if you just go in gung-ho and say, well, what's this? Why are you not doing it this way? Not only will people put their backs up, and you'll not really be able to build those relationships as well, but it might turn out actually that there's such a good reason why it's done a certain way that you might end up feeling a wee bit foolish if you kind of go in all guns blazing. And also understanding that different studies require different setups. The team will be different each time depending on the research question and the intervention and what's being done. But always thinking, like you said, not only how can people be helpful to me, but how can I be helpful to them? What can I bring to this table? What, is it actually, in order to build a relationship, you're in a busy clinic, you're recruiting your patients, but you can see that they've not got a healthcare support worker that day, and you've got a big gap. Can you do heights and weights just to help them make their clinic run faster, so that at least you're being a help and not a hindrance? How can you just be helpful to everybody that you come into contact with? Because that will then...
That can help your career across the board, isn't it? If you become somebody who people like working with,
yes,
in academia, in this place where we work, being somebody who I think kind of works hard, there's no doubt about that, but also does what they say that they will do.
Yeah.
If you say you're going to do something, be the person who kind of delivers on doing what you say you're going to do, and being somebody who people enjoy working with, I think can make sure that when you're next looking for your job, or they're looking for team members, I think that will open up doors. We've got a few minutes left, and as our regular viewers will know, we've trained an AI model specifically on content from Dementia Researcher. So this isn't learnt from the internet. This is learnt from our hundreds and hundreds of blogs, podcast transcripts, live stream transcripts, all the posts on our website, everything we've ever put, which is over 3,000 pages of content on the Dementia Researcher website, has been used to train an AI. And I've thought of two. So I start by, in advance of this, I always ask it what would be the 10 top takeaways on this topic, but I've had an extra one as well, just while we were speaking. So here we are. Now we're going to test Laura and Emma to see if they got the things that our AI thinks they should have done. So let's start with number 1. Acknowledge and respect the different languages each discipline brings. Number 2, clarify shared goals and avoid conflicts later. I think you both tick that box. Build trust through transparency and regular communication. You both said that too. Number 3, value contributions equally. No discipline should be treated as secondary. Number 5, Emma, you definitely picked up on that one. Number 5, recognize and address power imbalances between professions. We've talked about that too. Bring people with lived experience into teams as equal contributors. I think we all agree on that one. Number 7, use research nurses and coordinators as vital connectors between groups. I think that's when the nurses really are the glue, aren't you, that holds things together. That's of course if it's clinical. If it's lab based, maybe the research assistants, the postdocs kind of fill that role. Celebrate small wins to keep multidisciplinary teams motivated. That's bringing in the cake, right? I mean, you've both mentioned that. Be the person who brings in cake or suggests after Friday beer drinks, maybe. Number 9, be flexible. Progress often requires compromise and adaptability. And number 10, encourage early career researchers to step outside their comfort zones and connect with other disciplines. I think you ticked all those boxes. I did quickly ask as well, while we were speaking, what were 10 tips on being a good team player? And this came up. We'll quickly run through these. Communicate clearly, keep your team up to date, listen actively, and ask questions when you're unsure. Number 2, respect other people's ideas, even if you disagree with them. Acknowledge contributions and consider different viewpoints. Number 3 was be reliable. Deliver on promises to meet deadlines so other people know that they can count on you. Number 4, offer support. Help colleagues when they're under pressure, even with small tasks. I think this has read some of my blogs. It's all stuff I know I've written about before. Number 5, stay positive. Maintain a constructive attitude, especially during challenging times. I think, yeah, when things go wrong, don't be that person that kind of flies off the handle. You've got to be the adapt when needed, share credit, handle conflict calmly, contribute actively, and keep learning. Be open to feedback and use it to improve your own work and that of your team. This has been brilliant. Thank you so much, both of you, for giving up your evening. Laura, who's just had a very long train journey, technical difficulties, and has a presentation delivered tomorrow, and still managed to nail it this evening from the comfort of a hotel. And Emma, who very kindly stepped in and I should just add here, I texted Emma on Sunday morning, I think it was. But I did lose all train of it was a bank holiday weekend in the UK, and I forgot what day it was. So I'm a terrible person but Emma replied and said, yeah, sure. So thank you so much, Emma. And Chris, who was supposed to be speaking today, that's it. You're never coming back. You can't leave me in the lurch with 3 days. No, I'm kidding. Chris, you're always welcome to come back. Thank you very much, the incredible Laura Rooney and the amazing Dr. Emma Law. You've both been fantastic speakers this evening. We'll be back in the salon next Wednesday, also again at 8 o'clock in the evening, where we've got Daniel Ruiz-Gabar from the UK DRI in Edinburgh, and we also have Dr. Lauren Walker from Newcastle University. In an entirely different train of thought, we're going to be talking about working with brain tissue in dementia research. Both of them work brain tissue and work with brain banks, so we're going to talk about that. And then we just have 3 more salon sessions before in October we're going to be here with an all-new debate series. This is our a new idea that I dreamt it up at a conference, and luckily for me, people went along with the idea. So I won't tell you all of them. If you want to know what all the topics are that we're going to be talking about, you can go look at our social media where we've posted a list of those. But we've certainly got in there lots about peer review, whether AI is a good thing, whether animal models still serve a purpose. Should we have genetic testing for over 40s? How should research be funded? Should we be funding more on prevention or more on cure, or should grant funding be decided by lottery? These are all things that I've managed to find somebody to debate for and against each of these topics. And so we're going to spend October, November and December having our series of 10 debates, and a change from our webinars. And we're going to have January off, and we're going to be back, or sometime off over Christmas, and we'll be back with more webinars in the new year. Thank you very much again, Laura and Emma. You've been incredible. Have a great evening, and we'll see you all next week in the salon. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.